All right. Well, hello once again, everybody at all the campuses. We're really glad to have you, and happy Father's Day weekend, especially, of course, to you dads. Let's celebrate dads, and you know, dads, you're kind of a big deal. And one of the ways we'll show that is today we're breaking from our series called Resolve. We'll finish that series next week. Resolve is about looking at our relationships, and that because all of us have just trouble, our unresolved stuff in relationships, we tend to leave there, and it weighs those relationships down, changes those relationships in ways that are unnecessary if we're able to do our part to resolve those issues and be free of all that stuff. And so that's what we're gonna talk about that next week. So for one more week, our relationships are gonna be kind of messed up. But next week, they're gonna be awesome. So that's the good news, right? So I look forward to that. But today, we're talking not only to dads, but to all of us about how to pass the faith on to the next generation. But we all know that dads have a really, really big role in that. And as I said, dads are kind of a big deal. And just to highlight that, I'm gonna read some quotes from some kids about their dads. And these are from essays that the state of Illinois has been doing this essay contest since the 1990s. They have around 500,000 of these essays from kids about their dad. And here's some excerpts from just a few of them. This one from a sixth grader. Without my father, it would be like a ball without any air inside it. Whenever I'm feeling sad, he comes and cheers me up by telling me a silly joke or buying me a pack of baseball cards. My dad is a hardworking man, but he still has time for me. So way to go, that dad. Here's from a first grader. Now, you see Frito-Lay. I pulled this one since Frito-Lay is headquartered in Plano, so some of you are Frito-Lay people. He is a Frito-Lay man. That's an important job because Frito-Lay means chips, which is food. That is so important because you could not live without food. So there you go. He's proud of his dad. Here's from a fourth grader. My dad is so great that if someone offered me a choice to be rich or to love my dad, I'd say definitely love my dad. I'm already rich. I've got the greatest dad. Now, is that sweet or what? Now, I could keep going with these, but I hope you get the idea, dads, that you are more than kind of a big deal. And in fact, I want to say to those of you who are, I'm talking to you because you're here at one of our campuses. The fact that you're here is a big deal because whether you realize it or not, it communicates a whole lot to your kids about what's important. And the fact that, you kind of get a free pass on Father's Day. You could do anything you wanted, and you chose to be here. Now, some of you are thinking, wait a minute, I could have done anything I wanted. Nobody told me that. But I'm still going to count you, okay? That, hey, you're here, you showed up, and that certainly tells your kids a lot about what's important in life and what's important to you in terms of your spiritual life and your spiritual journey. And it tells me a lot about that too, which is why we're talking about this today, how to pass the faith on to the next generation. Because the fact that you're here, even if you're not a Jesus follower, means that you take your spiritual questions and your search very seriously. If you are a Jesus follower, you're saying, man, I want to grow in my faith, and I want to continue to take steps with God. And I know you're the kind of person that says, man, I want to pass on faith to my kids, faith to the next generation. And so we're going to talk about how to do that. Now, I know that most of the people I'm talking to right now are not dads, but all of us, 100% of us in whatever room you're at today, has this in common, that you and I have responsibility to pass the faith on to the next generation. It's incumbent on every generation to pass the faith on to the next, however we relate to kids in our lives. And God has placed kids in all of our lives. And you and I have a role to play. So some of you are moms. Some of you are grandparents. Some of you are bigger brothers, big sisters. Some of you are aunts or uncles. Some of you have relationships where you're kind of a dad to somebody that may not be biologically connected to you, but that's the role God has placed in your life. You're a mentor to them, however you relate to the life of a kid. And all of us in whatever room you're in, if you're part of our church, you and I have responsibility for the upcoming generations in our church to make sure we pass on the faith. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to talk about it because this is a baton pass. That's why I have the baton. Just like a race is in a relay race, as you pass the baton from one generation to the next. How do we not fumble the baton pass? but instead pass it on in a way that the next generation could run into the future that God wants for them and live and flourish the way God wants us to live and flourish, and to live in the destiny that each person comes into this world with to fulfill. We all want that for the kids in our lives. And I would argue that right now is a really critical time in history, in American history, American church history, that we not fumble that baton pass. And at another time, which was a critical time in history, was in the Old Testament. And that's where we're going to be today to say, well, how do we do this? Because it's an extremely practical passage in the Bible where God says, here's how you do this. And it's in Deuteronomy 6. As Moses was encouraging or commanding the people of God in the Old Testament as they were going into the promised land, the land that God had promised for them. If you know the Moses story, so this is Moses talking to the people of God, preparing them. And one of the things he's preparing them to do is how to pass the baton well. And he starts off saying this: these are the commands, decrees, and laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you're crossing the Jordan to possess. He's just given them all these instructions in the book of Deuteronomy. So that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord your God, which means to live in obedience to God with him at the center of our life, as long as you live by keeping all his decrees and commands that I give you, and so that you may enjoy long life. Hear, Israel, and be careful to obey, so that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. Earlier at all of our campuses, we sang the blessing, and how we would hope that blessing would go on from generation to generation to generation, to their children and their children and their children and so on. That is what Moses is saying, that God wants you in our generation to enjoy the blessing that comes from obeying him and obeying what he commanded, because that's what makes life flourish. When God gives commands in the Bible and all this stuff, it's not to weigh us down. It's not to ruin our life. It's not to show who's boss. The reason he does that is as a gracious God, he's created the world. He knows how it works. And so his instructions to us as we live in obedience and deepening relationship with him is the only way life can really flourish. And so as they're going in the land, he said, man, I want you to know that, but I also want your children and their children and their children to live in that same way. Well, how do we make that happen? Let's keep going. This is the baton. We're talking about passing the baton, and he'll talk about how, but first the baton. Like, what are we passing on, or what do we hope to pass on? Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. That's the baton. A passionate devotion to God where he's the center of our life. Where love for God is what drives our life. Where we say, I'm going to love the Lord my God. I'm going to love God with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my strength, everything I have. I'm not just going to, say, yeah, I believe, or show up at church every now and then, or whatever. Say, yeah, I'm a Christian. That's nice, but that's not what we're passing on. What we want to pass on is a vibrant spirituality that says, no, my life is about God, and it's the love for him that drives everything. He's the center of my life. Now, this verse is called the Shema. It's actually a really important verse in the Bible. It's called the Shema because the Hebrew word for hear. The way this became so important in the nation of Israel that you could argue is the most important verse in the whole Bible. Certainly the Old Testament, for several reasons. One is Jesus would have done this growing up too. Every good Israelite would have said this first thing when they woke up in the morning. They would say the Shema. And just before they went to bed, this is the last thing they would do, they would say the Shema. When Jesus was asked in the New Testament, what's the most important command in the whole Bible? Guess what he said? He said the Shema, this verse, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And again, it's a life commitment that says, this is what life is about. My life is about him. And it's love for him that drives me. Now, that's what we want to pass on to our kids, that kind of vibrant spirituality and focus on Jesus. But how do we do that? He's going to get really practical here. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. He's saying be intentional about the baton pass, which means a couple things. One is, first and most importantly, develop your own contagious relationship with God. We just read it. These commands that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. The only way you and I can impress these things on our children is if we have them ourselves. You and I cannot give to somebody else what we don't already have. And if you and I don't have a vibrant relationship with God, guess what? We don't have that to pass on to the next generation. And that's why he's saying the best thing you can do for the next generation is develop a passionate relationship with God so that you can then pass that on, because spirituality is way more caught than taught. That's why I use the word contagion or contagious disease, like a contagious disease, because that's really the way spirituality and all kinds of things are passed on, is more organically, like a contagious disease. And we know a little bit about contagious diseases lately, right? And coming out of a pandemic. And it's nice to say that phrase, coming out of a pandemic. But we're still kind of in a little bit of an awkward phase, right? I had to do several errands yesterday, and driving around was like, oh man, should I, so I put a mask in my pocket, but I'm vaccinated and think, well, should I wear one or not? And so you go in one place, it was obvious you never know there was a pandemic in that place. But then I went to another place and everybody was still wearing masks, so it's just kind of this awkward thing. Do I wear them or not? And what I'm seeing more and more is people doing this, is they'll wear it, but they wear it like this. You see that a lot? And if you're listening, it's underneath my chin, which I guess is a way of saying, hey, look, for those of you who, think we should be wearing masks, I'm with you. But for those of you who don't, I'm not going to put it over my mouth. So it's like making everybody happy, which, look, in my job, you learn really quick you can't make everybody happy, and so don't even try. But or handshakes, right? Handshakes are getting more and more normal, and now I'm fine. If you come up, shake my hand, I'll shake it, and I'll be fine. But like a month ago, it was like, wait a minute, I'm not sure about this. What are you doing? Put that thing back. I don't really want that. And I go through these quick calculations in my head, because I got the J&J vaccine, which, the Pfizer and Moderna is like 96% effective. J&J is like 85%. So doing quick math, like somebody sticks out their hand, if they have COVID, I'm thinking, okay, I got an 85% chance of being okay. But that means I got a 15% chance of not being okay. That's like 1 out of every, 8 handshakes, I could be a goner, but unless that person is vaccinated, then the math is way in my favor. And then I don't even have to worry about it really if they're vaccinated. And but how do I know they're vaccinated? So you do the quick thing. Do they look like the kind of person that would blow it off, or the kind of person that would do it? So all that stuff. Maybe you're not tortured like that, but but now I'm okay. I'm kind of over it. But for a little while, you just that awkward thing, right? That's contagion. And well, spirituality is passed on the same way. As we want to pass on things to our kids, it's much more caught than taught. We can tell our kids, hey, don't do what I do what I say. And it doesn't work that way, right? I remembered this the other day. I was driving down the road, and just, how you remember things, but I remember when Caleb, my youngest, was in the back seat, like in a car seat. So he was barely 3 years old, I think, older 3-year-old kind of range. And I'm driving, and somebody is slow in the left-hand lane, which is a sin. I don't know if you know that. And so they were going slow in the left-hand lane. It's called a passing lane in the Bible. I don't know if you've read that. It's in Second Opinions 3 or something like that. But anyway, we go up, and it's, this person's in the passing lane, not passing, just going slow. And I probably am a little close. And I hear from the back, out of the way, bozo. Out of the back. Yeah, Caleb. Now, where did he hear that? Obviously, Christy. He'd been driving around with Christy. But kids do what we model more than what we say. And sometimes I wish that wasn't true, right? Because we're all imperfect people, but that's the way it works. But kids can handle imperfect devotion to God. They really can. They can't handle hypocritical devotion to God, but they can handle, giving it the best shot you got, right? And focusing on Him. And that's what we want to pass on to our kids. And here's the scary thing is you and I actually are passing on spirituality to our kids, whether we realize it or not. We're passing on, just take spirituality out of it, just what's important in life. We're teaching them, whether we realize it or not. By the way, we're already doing what we're doing. And you think, uh-oh, is that really what I want to be passing on? And that's true for all of us, however we relate to a kid, but just to show how powerful dads can be. This was a survey done in Sweden, so a more secular culture than our culture is, and about church attendance. This was really fascinating to me. If mom and dad, these are regular attenders on the top, if mom and dad regularly attended church, when their kids got older and made their own choices, 72% of them in this study regularly attended church. If only dad did, 55% did. If only mom did and dad blew it off, it drops to 15%. If mom and dad both were sporadic, most kids just blew it off altogether. But wow, the power of a dad. Right now, again, this is to all of us, but man, to those of you who are dads, and hey, I'm preaching to the choir, like you're here, which is awesome. And let me encourage you. I mean, there's a lot of people who, coming out of a pandemic, have put their spiritual life on the back burner. And I understand that. It's like, man, I want to go to the beach. Like, I'm not thinking about, that stuff. I mean, I'll get to that later maybe, or whatever. There's a lot of that, and I kind of can understand a season like that. But I am concerned about a number of people who are just drifting spiritually. And we know that all across the country, they've been doing these surveys, and people are just sort of drifting out there who were connected, and so let me just ask you, if you're in a group and you haven't seen somebody in your group in a long time, reach out to them and say, man, I just want to make sure you're okay. I'd love for you to go to group with me. Or if somebody used to sit around in church and like, man, I haven't seen you in a long time, at whatever campus you're at, just call them and say, man, hey, why don't you come next week and sit with me, or involved in a ministry, or whatever it is, to not put it on the back burner. But anyway, for those, if we're going to pass on the faith to the kids, the best thing we can do is develop our own spirituality. And hey, there's never any guarantees on this, by the way, right? And I don't want you to hear this message saying, hey, what I'm saying today will guarantee that your kids are going to follow Jesus fully. There are no guarantees. They're going to make their own choices. It's just a matter of, hey, how can I set it up to make it the most possible, the most likely for that to happen? And I've said, hey, what we do is way more important than what we say, but what we say is important. And that's why we're go to next. Seize every opportunity to talk about the faith with your kids. That's what he says. He says, impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home. Talk about what? About the things of God, about his commands and decrees and how God sees the world, what we have in the scriptures and so on. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road. When you lie down, when you get up, tie them as symbols on your hands, bind them on your foreheads, write them on the door frames of your houses, on your gates. He wasn't talking about being overly literal with this kind of stuff. You don't have to put something on your forehead. But what he is saying is just, look, it's just every way you can. Just go crazy with it. Get creative with it. But every way you can, informally, as you go through your day, as you go through your week, at your house, or however you relate to a kid, look for every opportunity to talk about things that matter, to talk about spiritual things, to talk about God. Now, we'll give you a little bit more practical stuff on that here in a minute with somebody we'll be talking with. But let me also add this, that to facilitate the kinds of conversations we're talking about, intentional spiritual conversations, it's one of the reasons, or one of the enhancements, or one of the additions we're making to KidZone. I think at all the campuses, they've talked about how KidZone is becoming KidsCo. And that's not just a name change. That's not just an external branding change or something. There are changes it'll still be fun and awesome and all that, but we're wanting to make some improvements. And one of those is just to pass the faith on to the next generation as best as possible in the curriculum. As we've thought about it, it goes from like birth all the way to somebody graduates high school, to say, what do kids and students need to know and need to think deeply about for whatever, biblically and theologically and all that, and as they face different decisions, what do they need to be exposed to? What do they need to know through that whole course of life? And so there's scope and sequence to the curriculum. And then it's opportunity. There's only so much we can do each week in that short amount of time they have. And so then it's an opportunity, and there'll be opportunities, you'll see this for parents or however you relate to a kid, to then engage the conversation and take it deeper. And so you'll know, man, we're having the kinds of conversations that we really need to be having. Because it's hard to know, right? Well, what do I do? I mean, yeah, I'd love to do that, but what do I do? And so that's one of the big changes in kids' homes, to say, man, get them involved, and then there'll be a part to play. And it's not intimidating. It just be natural conversation that you're able to have to take that deeper. And if you're looking for a way to get plugged in, if you're looking for a way to serve, if you're looking for a way to make a difference, I don't think there's a more strategic way than children or student ministry, especially going into this next era as we go into Kids Co. And next week we'll talk a little. There'll be a way to do that. So if you come next week, you can go online and find out now. But if you come next week, there'll be a way to kind of say, yeah, I want to do that. And so just be praying about that and thinking about that. And it's also a blast. My wife, Christy, comes on Friday nights to Legacy and watches the service. And then on Sundays, often she's at Woodbridge leading her small group at Studio 56. And I'd love to say that her best part of her church week was listening to me on Friday nights. I haven't asked her because I don't want to know the answer, but I think the answer would be, oh man, those kids at Studio 56 every Sunday. Because she comes, she just can't wait when we meet for lunch after church, and she's like, oh, you wouldn't believe what they said today, or you wouldn't believe what this person, and she's so impressed. She's like, these kids are amazing. Like, they're so amazing. They're so smart, and they're so godly, and the way they're thinking. She said, man, it's just amazing to think that kids at 5th grade and 6th grade are having these kind of conversations. And so anyway, commercial over. But if you're looking for a way to serve, it's a great way to serve. Because we just, as a church, we don't want to fumble the baton pass. As a church, we want to get this one right. We've got to get this one right. And it's going to involve all of us, and certainly those of you who are parents. And to say, man, let's get it right. And how do we do that? Well, develop our own faith that's contagious, that hopefully can catch on, and then be intentional about passing the faith on. That's Deuteronomy 6. Now, to make this more practical and even how to grow our faith more practical, I'm going to invite somebody to the stage that is a very special person to invite to the stage. It's Gene Getz, who is, for those of you who don't know, Gene is the one who started our church. So he's no stranger to this church. He started this church. I was able to serve with him for 15 years on staff before he handed the senior pastor baton to me about, 16 years ago. And so I served with him, and he's my mentor, and the person I look at as just, man, who are godly people in your life who you model and who you emulate. He's certainly that person for me. He's done a lot. He's written over 60 books, Measure of a Man being one of those that 50 years later is still a best-selling book, which is amazing. And he's also written 2 study Bibles. You'll hear about one that's brand new, but Life Essentials Study Bible. He's done, many of us use that. And he's just an amazing person. He also had COVID, and we were praying for him because he was in the hospital for months and is emerging out of that. And we're so glad that he is, that God answered a whole lot of prayers in that time. So let's welcome Gene to our stage. All right. Well, Gene, you're getting a standing ovation because you deserve it, and because we love you. And we've been praying for you, as I said, with COVID. It's been quite a journey. Catch us up a little bit with how you're doing.
Well, it hit me hard, I'll tell you. I was in the hospital, as most of you know, for about 8 months. Care center. I've been home for about 3 months with the best caregiver in the world, my wife Elaine. And so it's just, it's exciting to be here. And thanks for the message. That was great. I was listening in the back. You know, I was thinking about this. One thing I could share is that just a little bit over a week ago, Elaine and I had our 65th wedding anniversary. And since I'm not able to go out, excuse me, one of the results of the COVID affecting my vocal cords, but I had food brought in the house, and my family was there. And I didn't really realize this, but early on when I was in the hospital the first week or so, that the doctor said this would be a good time to bring the whole family in. And you know what that means. Last stages and make your goodbyes. And I just sat and listened to it being reenacted as they talked about it. And I realized that one of the greatest blessings that has come from this whole experience is to know how much my children love me, and to really know that they love you in a situation like that.
Absolutely.
So it's been quite a journey, and I'm just thankful I can be here with you all.
Yeah, we are too. Now, we were talking earlier in the week about Deuteronomy 6, the passage we just looked at.
One of my favorite passages.
And you mentioned that, and so I know it was a really important passage for you and Elaine and the way you parented your children and are grandparenting your grandchildren. And so talk a little bit about how you think about that, how you've applied that passage.
Well, it's a great passage, and the thing that really comes out of the passage, Jeff, as you related today, is the spontaneity that's involved there. You know, it's not saying, sit down, I'm going to teach you a Bible lesson. It's natural. And children grow up in an environment, a natural environment, as they age and get older. And things happen whereby you can bring the word to bear. You mentioned one thing this morning about God and nature, and God created, and just brought back memories. We were in New Mexico one time and climbing a mountain, and we decided to look and see how many different flowers we could find from the time we started until we got to the top. I think we found about 40 different flowers, and they were looking and so forth, and it was just a wonderful opportunity to talk about the God of creation. For them, just to grasp the creativity in all those flowers says something about who God is.
Yeah.
That's just a little miniature of who he is, but those are the natural opportunities, and those are the things that they don't forget, and neither do we.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and part of the passage, as you know, is developing our own faith that we can pass on, and building up our own relationship with God. And you've written a number of books that do just that, and including Measure of Man, as we talked about, and 60 or so others. But the study Bible that a lot of us use in our spiritual walk, the Life Essential Study Bible. And if you don't know what that is, the Life Essential Study Bible has over 1,500 principles drawn out of the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. And then there's a little QR code, and there's a teaching moment with Gene explaining that principle out of that passage. So that, a lot of times you look at the Bible and you're like, yeah, I don't know what that's talking about. And so you can look at the QR code and be like, oh, that's what it's talking about. It actually applies to my life. And so it's a really powerful tool. And so, it's because of that, it's being used a lot and growing a lot. And so In fact, something happened just a few weeks ago in Austin that I thought was really cool. I wanted you to talk about it. So let's talk about that.
Well, one of our representatives, Phil King, who is in District 61, which is west of Fort Worth, I had not met him, but I had been in his church. I spoke. We made the Bible available, and people bought them like crazy. It was thrilling to see their interest in it. And Phil got a copy. And unknown to me, he'd been reading it and watching the videos. And I got this text from Phil King, one of our representatives. And he said, Gene, Bible's changing my life. He said, every day I read and I watch a video, and he said, I meet with other representatives, I meet with other men, and he said, I give out this Bible and share with them. But he said, what I would like to do is have you come to Austin and lead us in prayer and opening in a session. And he said, I'd like to make a resolution to the whole house to recognize your ministry and what you've done, and particularly the Bible. I was overwhelmed, obviously, with that. And they did that. I was not able to go. My family had a little meeting with me, what you might call it an intervention, because I wanted to go badly, but Dave Powers represented me. And in fact, you'll see a picture. This is the house, and on the desk of every representative was a copy of Life Essential Study Bible, which Phil King Phil and several of the other representatives got together to finance the project, and here are four or five of them that are holding the Bible. And by the way, when the Senate found out about it, well, let's just say we heard about the fact they felt neglected, and so we sent 30 more Bibles. There were 150 plus the 30. So just pray that God will use that in the lives of these political figures to give them guidance at a time in our culture where they need tremendous guidance as far as our culture is concerned.
Yeah. And in Life Essentials is, going out all over the place, not just in this country, but around the world, being translated and being used, and to equip pastors, to equip Christians in their faith. And there's some exciting things happening there. And I know we can't feature everything, but let's catch us up with Uganda.
Well, and it's beginning to pay off, things that we've done. 2 years ago, I sat down with a man from India who was going to Southwest Seminary, and he teaches in a Bible school in India. And I taught him how to use it to teach others, other men particularly, and women, who are preparing for ministry, to prepare messages. Because so many of these people just have had no training, no formal training. And so about 2 weeks ago, he called and said, Gene, I'm finished with my training. I'm heading back. And as you said, I could take Bibles with me. I'd like 200. And I said, hey, we'll have them all ready, and you can take them back to India and use it to train these others in the Bible school. We also have had a wonderful privilege teaming with a mission in Canada to build a Life Essentials Training Center in Uganda, Africa. There's a number of buildings. There are 5 motel units where you can house 5 pastors, and they can come in for a week. So you have like 25 pastors or so, and they spend the week training these pastors on how to prepare a message. And they use the Bible to do that. And they have all the technology there. We've been working on this for 3 years. It is 99% finished, and we're getting ready to ship 2,000 Bibles to Uganda, which will be used over the next several years to equip these men that come in from different places throughout Uganda. And they'll probably have some weeks for women where they bring them in as well. So it's a thrill. And the way we do that, Jeff, as you know, for every Bible we sell through our ministry, we give one away. All the profits go into our ministry. And for example, if you all bought 2,000 Bibles this weekend, if you did, that would provide 2,000 Bibles in India.
Yeah.
Isn't that exciting?
Yeah.
So we're not only blessing you, we're blessing people literally all over the world.
And at all our campuses, there is opportunity to purchase one of these Bibles. And it is, when you buy one is given away in one of these settings. And as a church, we also, in addition to that, want to participate in another way. And we do this from time to time out of our global fund. It was a surprise Friday night to you. Yeah. But I took the check back.
Right.
And so now we actually get to give it to you.
I'll try to make it a surprise.
Yeah. But basically you who give to the Global Fund are gifting Gene and the ministry $10,000 for that project. And so, yeah.
Wow. There's 10 grand. For the Bibles, by the way, for the Bibles we're sending, just our cost, you pay, of course, the full cost, but just our cost, the 50%, that costs us 70 grand to send those 2,000 Bibles, a lot of Bibles.
Yeah.
So here's 10,000 towards that.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord.
Absolutely.
Maybe we'll make it.
Yeah, we'll make it. So now there's a new study Bible you just came out with that you just finished before all this craziness happened that just came out called the Men of Character Study Bible. And so when I talk about books that Gene wrote, there are a number of them some of them like Sharpening Folks of the Church were for church leaders thinking about church, but a lot of them were also about just helping Christians grow in their faith, and men often, like Measure of a Man, grow in their faith. And so from that is this Men of Character Bible. And tell us about it.
Well, basically what this is, and it came again as a total surprise, just like Life Essentials. I had just passed my baton to you. Gracious. That's been over 15 years ago,
yeah.
Jeff.
I know.
And I got this call to do the Life Essentials Study Bible, the principles to live by with the videos. That took 7 years, by the way. So it was God's timing. But while they were here, we were doing a revision of Life Essentials. And on the way to the airport, the publisher, the guy that was in charge, said, Gene, we would love to do a men's study Bible, a Men of Character study Bible. Because I had written a number of books for men, The Measure of a Man, and I wrote 12 books just on Old and New Testament characters. And so he said, what we'll do is assign you an editor who'll go through everything you've written, and on men particularly, and then give it to you to edit and to organize. Would you do it? And so I prayed about it, and I made a commitment to that. And so that's been a project I've been working on. And it has articles on men as you're reading through, on Moses, Joshua, Joseph, New Testament, the apostles, Jesus. And as you're reading along, you'll have articles with principles. You'll have profiles of these men. And you'll have, of course, the Measure of a Man qualities of maturity. And so all of that is woven in to the biblical text. And by the way, in terms of God's timing, I just finished all of that work when I got struck with COVID. But I had all the basic work done and was able to submit it. They've been working on it, and believe it or not, a week or two ago, it was on a ship on California Bay. But they got him here today for Father's Day. So I'm thrilled. I'd love to sign every one of them. In a sense, I have. I've signed them. But I'd love to be there to look at you and shake your hand, but I can't. The doctor said I'm not quite ready for that. And so I regret that. But I'd like to give you just a great big hug right now and say, I love you very, very much. Thank you.
So that's a faith worth passing on, right? And that's what we want to do, from generation to our children and their children and their children and their children.
And by the way, Jeff, what is true of the men's Bible, or the Life Essentials, is true of the men's Bible. They're the same cause. And so my dream and hope is to get this Bible all over the world in the same way. Because the men who are growing up in some of these countries absolutely have no concept of fathering. What it means to be a father, a dad, or a husband. They have no clue. And so if we can help them, it's going to help the church.
Yep. So those will be available in a little bit. Your campus pastor or host will tell you how that's going to work at your campus in terms of how do I get one of these Bibles, or for me or someone else or whatever. Not for me, but for you or someone else. But as I said, I mean, we want to do a great job, right, of passing the baton the best we can. And so how are we going to do that? Well, really, the church is really just us, right, as individuals, developing our own faith that we can pass on, and then being intentional about how to do that. And so I want to close this time out in prayer and pray that God will help us do that, and pray for the next generation at a critical time. And so let's bow our heads together. Father, I do thank you that you really want our life to be blessed. That you love us, you care enough about us that, first of all, you want to know us. You want to have a relationship with us. That's why you sent Jesus into the world, who died on the cross for our sins so that we would not have to pay the penalty for that ourselves, because we can't. And that you offer relationship with you and forgiveness from sin as a grace, as a gift. And so, Father, I pray for anybody in this room that has yet to take that step, just to say right now in their heart, yes, Lord, I want that. I want you in my life. I want your forgiveness in my life. I want your presence in my life. I want to be one of those people that love you with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my strength. And once we have a relationship with God, for those who just prayed that prayer, an opportunity for us to just say, God, help me become one of those, love the Lord your God with all my heart, all my soul, all my strength. Help me become that kind of person. And then I want you to think about kids in your life. And I know that some of you have little kids, some of you have adult kids, some of you have kids who are walking with God, some of you have kids who've rejected God so far in their life, who are not walking with God. And this is not about a guilt or shame moment, because I got to tell you, as a pastor, there are families with a vibrant relationship with God whose kids do not take the baton, and vice versa. I just want to entrust these kids to God. And so whether your kids are walking with God or not, let's entrust them to Him. Say, God, would you move into their heart and move into their life in a powerful way and pull them towards yourself. And Father, would you help us as a church to do our part in passing the baton? And I do thank all these dads that are here, that are showing up. I mean, they're here, and pray that you would honor them today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Wow. One of the things that I'm so privileged right now is that, Gene, you started Chase Oaks back in 1972. And that was the year I was born. 49 years later, I get to share the stage with you. That is a testimony that God is so not done with you, Gene. God is so not done with you. And there's so much more work that He wants to do through you. You're 89 years young, and you're here, and you're passing the baton continually and moving forward. So thank you so much for fighting the good fight and continuing the fight with us all here at Chase Oaks Church. Woo. And y'all, I did the math. We need at least, 1,715 more Bibles bought, okay? It's a sale. It's BOGO. Buy one, give one. Free. All right? Buy one, give one. It'll be out in the lobby, all signed. You guys, come on. Let's do this. Let's really send tons of Bibles out there. And let's really grow in our faith as well through Gene's Bibles. Hey, you know what? If you need prayer, our care team will be up front. We'd love to pray with you. Peggy and I will be hanging out in the Be Our Guest area. We'd love to meet you. God bless you guys. Happy Father's Day. We'll see you guys later.